existentialism, when we started with Kierkegaard and then continued with Dostoevsky, Camus, Sartre, Nietzsche, and Heidegger. So in that lecture, I have mainly focused on Dostoevsky's Men from the Underground. And in his quite philosophical book, very short, called Notes from the Underground, Dostoevsky has already suggested his view of the world, not only in Russia, but also the global situation. And that subject of collision between two different cultures, Western, liberal, rational, scientific, materialistic, nihilistic view, compared to the Russian traditional Orthodox Christian view, has been perplexing some of the most famous Russian authors and philosophers, like for example Turgenev, Tolstoy, clearly Dostoevsky. So the Western influence on Russia was quite critical for Russian intelligence and Russian philosophical circles. While some of them were very pro-Western way of life, liberal if you want, with the seeds of socialism already growing during the revolutions in 1848 throughout Europe, some Russian thinkers were very much opposed to it. When I say that Dostoevsky belongs to the philosophy known as existentialism, I have to mention that Kierkegaard and Dostoevsky were very specific existential philosophers because they consider existence of God, and not just consider, they also favor that fate. While Camus, Sartre, and Nietzsche were completely opposite. For them, God wasn't existing. For Nietzsche, God was dead. For Sartre, God doesn't exist. Therefore, we are allowed for that absolute freedom. Now, with Kierkegaard and Dostoevsky, we have that with the former, that leap of faith, especially beautifully explained in his books Either Or and Fear and Trembling. If you read it, you will recollect. And when it comes to Dostoevsky, it's a very, very interesting situation. Dostoevsky is literally torn between individualism, Western social logic of socialism, liberalism, ideas of equality and freedom on one side, and also his background, his philosophical and also religious background of traditional Russian culture and also Orthodox Christianity. He is not necessarily interested in God as a metaphysical entity. He's not interested in salvation that will happen after life in the otherworldly realm, in the heaven announced by the church. He's interested in salvation here, right now, on earth. And he was very much involved in earthly life, by all means, good and bad, mainly bad. A quick reminder about him: born in 1821, he was only 28 years old when he was actually arrested because he was involved in a liberal group that actually supported authors, Russian authors, who were openly criticizing Tsar's Russia, Nicholas I, because the time of his involvement was critical. It was 1848, while all these socialist and labor revolutions throughout Europe were literally changing the landscape of social structure in the world. Russia was very much concerned about it, and Tsar and his administration obviously wanted to curb any potential risk of eventual revolution, which already happened actually in 1822 in Russia, they curb on all these liberal thinkers, and among them they arrested Dostoevsky as well. He was 29 years old, 28, 29. Eventually he was sentenced to death. Literally minutes before the execution, while they were all lined up in front of the firing squad, Dostoevsky was sixth in line. The message came, and Tsar has pardoned him. However, he was sentenced for 4 years in prison in Siberia, and after that he was also sent to compulsory army service for another 6 years. So during this period, this struggle for life, Dostoevsky actually enriched himself. He learned a lot about ordinary people who were criminals, peasants, murderers. He realized that in every single one of them there is still something human, that every single one of them still has a chance to repent. He still has that possibility of correcting themselves. And that was a very important for Dostoevsky, because if you read his books, you will see that in every single book there are always peasants or homeless people that he uses as an example of humans which are the same as us. There are many, many examples of that in his famous novel. But the question remains, is there a God or not? For Dostoevsky, there is not God in traditional sense of the concept. But Dostoevsky admits that we all have conscience. And he asks, is that God? So the answer to that question he tried to give us in his renowned novel, which is Brothers Karamazov. Brothers Karamazov was written in published in 1880, just 1 year before he died, and this was his last novel, so he knew that he's going to die, and he tried to give the world his magnum opus, obviously, la chef d'oeuvre, and quite a bit of his philosophy in previous books, like for example Idiot, Crime and Punishment, Double, and also, as I mentioned, Notes from the Underground, can be seen reflecting in this final masterpiece. Brothers Karamazov is a huge book. I don't know if anybody read. Not just that the book is big, but it's also extremely complex because it tackles different subjects. Every single subject of those many could have been the possible subject and plot for a separate book, but they're all together in one. So that massive, that grandiose attempt, probably his last gasp of life, can be seen in this huge and extremely deep philosophical novel. So where to start talking about this novel? The subject that he's treating there are clearly essential, they're fundamental. This is the subject of freedom, of faith, of love, of socialism, of atheism, of nihilism, of God. All of those subjects are actually compressed in this book. And reading this, one has to be very careful, understanding, maybe reading between the lines, because sometimes you have pages and pages of trivial descriptions of the situations. Like, for example, meeting Catherine or meeting another love of his life. He just comes up with some sentences with essential messages to us. So before I enter this subject, these themes, I just need to remind you quickly about the main characters. They are Fyodor Karamazov. This is the father of the family. This is a story, this is the murder story basically. So the family is very dysfunctional. The main character is Fyodor Karamazov. Then you have Alyosha, the youngest son, who is very spiritual. He's the monk actually. He is a novice in the monastery, taught by another extremely important character called Elder Zosima, which is objectified spiritual master. Then you have Dmitri, he's the oldest brother. Dmitri is completely opposite than Alyosha. He is the same as his father. Both of them are actually constantly in debauchery, in drinking, in gambling, spending money, living just day by day, whatever it takes, trying to live life in full. And then you have Ivan. Ivan is the intellectual, his third son. Ivan is very rational, and Ivan is actually embodiment of the Western philosophy of rationalism, socialism, materialism, logic, and more than anything else, embodiment of atheism. So there is another son. This is his illegitimate son called Pavel Smerdyakov. Smerdyakov meaning stinking, because of his mother, who was also she was a homeless woman, mentally ill. But for Fyodor Karamazov, that didn't matter. When he needed her, he managed to be with her, and from that relationship that Pavel was born. Pavel was never recognized as his son, but he always lived and worked in his house as a servant. So, interesting question is why Dostoevsky actually gave that main character name Fyodor, same as his. This is something that often I was asked discussing this subject. So there are many possibilities. One of those is that that actually he infused his character with Fyodor Karamazov, because Dostoevsky, although spiritually quite high, spiritually quite Jesus-like, he was also addicted gambler, and he couldn't stop gambling. He was losing money constantly, putting his family in jeopardy. He had 4 children, 2 of them died in infancy. His wife also died, and he married again, and he was constantly running into troubles because of his gambling addiction. Another of his problems was that he was also rational. He was influenced by European enlightenment, the philosophy of rationality. And he also felt a little bit guilty of that, because his spiritual side wasn't really inclined toward that European liberal enlightenment position. Another one is that Fyodor Dostoevsky also had a very perplexing and complex issue with his own father, and this is why he wanted to give the main character, the father, who is actually the bad character in the book, his own name, just signaling that his own relationship with his father wasn't really easy, and something that can be taken as an example for other fathers. We will see later on in the book, if I actually come to that point, that in one occasion he talks about mothers and fathers and what parents are. And he said somebody cannot just give birth to a child and be his mother or his father. He says that is not enough, because they need to love them, they need to look after them. This is what makes mother, and this is what makes father. So basically when Alyosha was defending Dmitri, he wanted to say that even if Dmitri committed the murder, he didn't actually kill his father, because his father was constantly neglecting him. So this may be another reason why Dostoevsky decided to give the name of the main character, the father, name as his own one. But there is another possibility which is biblical and Russian naming tradition, because Fyodor in Greek language means Theodorus. Theodorus meaning God's gift. So it's a bit ironic to give a negative character name, which is actually God's gift, or in Greek, Theodorus. The book starts with the introduction of the characters. I would not really go into this now because we will never finish this discussion. As I said, Dmitri is gambler. Dmitri is spending money on women, on drinking, on parties, and he wants his father to give him money, to give him 3,000 rubles so he can actually marry Grushenka, which is the woman of the love of his life. His father doesn't want to give him money because his father is also in love with Grushenka, and Dmitri is constantly fighting with his father. And this is the subject. This is the reason why many thought later on in the novel that actually he is the one who killed Fyodor Karamazov. Now, as I said, Alyosha is youngest son, 20 years old. His spiritual guru is Father Zosima, man who was already considered to be a saint because he completely lived a perfect Christ-like life. He just lived in austerity. He was promoting Christ's way of life. It's very important to say that. This is where I don't agree with Dostoevsky about splitting the views on the church between Orthodox Christianity and Catholic Church, as I will introduce to you a bit just in a bit. But however, Father Zosima plays a very important role because he teaches Alyosha that unconditional love of God to all people, known in Greek as agape. Everybody has to be loved, everybody deserves love, regardless of the crimes that they have committed. Everybody deserves that because everybody in himself or herself still, regardless of the crime, contains something which is typically human, as Jesus would say, heart of flesh. And Zosima is constantly proving and acting as Jesus. For example, when in the beginning of the novel, when the dispute between Dmitri, the oldest son, and Fyodor Karamazov reaches the point that they cannot agree about his inheritance, he doesn't ask for the full inheritance, he only asks for 3,000 rubles. But his father doesn't want to give him because he is in love with the same woman, and he knows if he gives him the money, Dmitri will marry Grushenka. And this is not the option for old Fyodor. Now they decide to go to Zosima. And if Zosima accepts that, and in the monastery, they start arguing about who should do what. And Dmitri, full of passion and rage and young and, loving life, as he would like to later say to the full, Dmitri insists on these 3,000 rubles because this is only a fraction of he actually should inherit. And he can't believe that a man like his father, like Fyodor, can live on this earth. He says to Zosima, the elder, he says everything that actually Fyodor did in his life and the way he lived, and he said exactly this word. He said, I can't believe that people like this can live on this earth. And he's basically outraged with his father. But Zosima doesn't respond to that. At the end, he just comes and kisses Dmitri's feet. This is that ultimate love that wins over any wrongdoing, any crime, any insult. Just an example how Zosima looked at the things. Then you have Ivan, who is an intellectual. He's atheist, and he is implanted into the plot. Brilliantly, because Dostoevsky needed two sides for dialogue, two sides for a dialectical approach to the problem. On one side there was Alyosha, who is fully spiritual, religious. On the other side is Ivan, who is atheist. Now, Ivan's credo was that if there is no God, everything is lawful. That will have a massive impact at the end. And clearly, what it comes in the chapter 4, which is called Rebellion, and also chapter 5, the Grand Inquisitor, which is the central point of the book and our discussion tonight. We'll explain Ivan's view and explain Ivan as an atheist. Pavel Smerdjakov is the illegitimate son. He lives as a servant, he lives in the house, Fyodor Karamazov's house, works as a servant and a lackey. But he's very much influenced by Ivan and Ivan's atheism. He pretends to be not very intelligent, and he also suffered from epilepsy. So every hero of Dostoevsky suffered from epilepsy, because Dostoevsky himself suffered from epilepsy. There are another two female characters which are important, but not necessarily. Maybe in the discussion you can ask those questions. That's Grushenka and Katerina Ivanova, which were both involved with Dmitri. I will have to actually jump quite a bit, and the reason, as I mentioned, is the book is huge, but the central point for us is that discussion between Ivan and Alyosha about the existence of God, between an atheist and theist, somebody who doesn't believe in God, and somebody who is very devoted, who is a monk himself. So, in the book 2, chapter 4, called Rebellion, Ivan talks about suffering in the world. Since Alyosha kept asking him to talk about himself, because he wanted to know his brother, Ivan said, all right, I'll talk to you, but I have to tell you that I don't believe in God, because you're a monk, so this is something that matters to us. And he started questioning the suffering in this world. So he said, if there is a God, there would be no suffering, because there is so much suffering in the world. Dostoevsky speaks in his own name through Ivan. This is that side of Dostoevsky, the intellectual, the rational. He looks at the world as suffering. Dostoevsky suffered a lot. His son died when he was 3 years old. He was called Alyosha. This is why one of the main characters, the young son Alyosha Karamazov, has got that name. So everything in the book is in a way autobiographical, not just in this book, in every book that Dostoevsky wrote. He's writing, as Nietzsche would say, with his own blood. He's writing from experience, from his own suffering. Now, Dostoevsky, through Ivan, questions the existence of God. And Ivan said, all right, men and women, grown up, they may suffer. They committed a crime, they committed the first sin. They were sent to Garden of Eden, and when God asked them to do whatever they want, to eat whatever they want, apart from one thing, they didn't listen. So the sin has been committed. And he says, I understand that. I can understand that grown-ups can suffer, although I'm not going to approve that, but I understand that, even from the religious point of view. But he said, children, suffering of children is unacceptable. And he gives examples to Alyosha. Alyosha is staring at him, speechless. There is nothing to say. And he said, do you know, he said, one Bulgarian has told me, Dostoevsky brings examples from history which have been proven exactly right. So whatever I say now, although very harsh and gross, it was exactly like that. Dostoevsky wouldn't use this example from his imagination. He said, do you know that some Bulgarian told me that during the wars with Turks would kill children, babies. Not just that, they would cut open pregnant women and they would throw the babies up in the air and wait on them with the bayonets, with knives, in front of their mothers dying, in front of their eyes. So Alyosha is staring at him and he can't believe that this is possible. But this is the fact. But then he says, yeah, but Turks, they are foreigners. So maybe we can understand it. But he said, Russians are wrong. They're not any better. He says, do you know that story that was written in the papers? That a 5-year-old girl was beaten heavily by their parents and left in the cold naked overnight, freezing cold, and that wasn't enough. But in the morning, her mother stuffed her face and her mouth with feces. This is Dostoevsky for you, right? And again, Alyosha is staring at him and he cannot believe that this is possible. This is his world, God's world, right? And then he goes further and says there is another story, again in Russia. An 8-year-old boy working on the farm, throwing stones around, playing, hits by accident the favorite dog of the master, the hunting dog, and the dog starts limping. So the master comes and says, who did this? The servants run and says, oh, that was that boy over there. So you have hit my favorite dog. Well, by accident. And then he said, okay, no problem. Strip him naked. They stripped him naked. Now he said, you run. And the boy ran. And then he unleashed the whole pack of hunting dogs after the boy, which grabbed the boy and tear him into pieces. And he asked Alyosha, so what would you do? And Alyosha said, well, he should be shot dead. And he said, this is what I wanted to hear from you. You, son of a god, representative of our religion, you're still understanding that this world as it is not acceptable. He said, I may believe in God, but I'm not accepting God's world as this. So Alyosha is completely devastated by these facts because he never thought this way. And then he said, look, there is another thing I want to talk to you. I was about to write a novel and I wanted to read it to you. Oh, Alyosha said, great, read it to me. But he says it's not written. But I remember it by heart. And that novel is going to be called The Grand Inquisitor. So Alyosha said, yeah, I would love to hear it. What is this all about? So he said, look, I wanted to give my view on the Catholic Church. In 16th century, apparently, Jesus came back to earth. And everybody recognized him. Now, Grand Inquisitor, who was the head of Inquisition in Spain, in Seville, ordered Jesus to be arrested. They arrest Jesus, they put him in prison, and then Grand Inquisitor comes down to talk to him. And he asks him, why did you come? After 1600 years, why did you come? You come to destroy all of this? Everything that you see now? This is why you came? Jesus didn't say a word. He's just looking at him and says nothing. He says, you and your free man, your freedom that you promised to people, how many of them followed you? Thousands? Tens of thousands? And what about millions? Hundreds of millions? hundreds of thousands of millions who could not follow you. What about them? You left them. And who took care of them? He says, we took care of them. You just left them. And you have been approached by the mighty spirit, read devil. And devil challenge you and question you. But you refused every challenge. He says, do you remember when devil said to you, give people bread and they will all follow you? And you said, no, man cannot live only on bread. We gave them bread and they all follow us. And they're happy because we feed them. But what you promised them, they couldn't live from that. So they rejected you. They came to us. The second challenge, you refused as well. And the devil, mighty spirit, asked you, make a miracle, jump from that hill and show people that the angels will come and they will save you. Convince them, they will follow you. You didn't want to do it. You said, I'm not going to test God. There's no need for that. We gave them miracles. We give them mystery. And they are following us now. All of them, they follow us. And when he last time asked you to go with him together, and then the whole world will follow you, you said, no, I'm not going to follow you. And they followed us because we gave them bread, gave them the mystery of heaven, and we took Rome, and we took Caesar's sword, and they followed us. So Alyosha is speechless. There is not, Jesus is just listening and doesn't answer to Great Inquisitor. And he says, who can rule man? Only the one who has his conscience and his bread. We have his conscience and we have his bread. And we promise them they will only become free if they give us their freedom and come down to our feet. And they have done it. Some of them were rebellious. They didn't. But most of them, they are meek and weak. And they all came to us. And this is what we have done for 1600 years. We took care of the world, of all these people that you have abandoned. And now he said, you came back to destroy all of this. I said, that's not going to happen. And he said, tomorrow you will be executed. And he was about to leave, and he asked God to take Jesus away. And Jesus stood up, came to him, and kissed him in the lips. This was the only comment on everything he has said. Now, clearly, with this story, with this poem that apparently Ivan was about to write, Dostoevsky is pointing out to the dominance of a Catholic Church, which he in Europe and around the world, which has turned into Rome, meaning an empire, meaning a power, nothing to do with Jesus. He says we used him as an excuse. We used you while he was talking to Jesus, just as an excuse. But he never meant to deliver what you wanted to deliver. We gave them a right to sin. We make them little children, because little children are happy. And if they sin, as they sin, they will love us. And this is what they've done. And they love us like children. But he also said we took Rome, we took Caesar's sword, meaning we have the power, the biggest power in the world. So Dostoevsky is obviously very critical about it. and he's much more in favor of Eastern Christian Orthodox Christianity, which I may dispute through discussion. And after this, Alyosha looked at Ivan and said, I still love you, my brother. Again, Jesus-like reaction. I still love you, even if you don't understand, even if you don't believe in God. But don't forget, I will always love you because you're my brother. There is much more that comes after. I will leave that for the discussion, but the main subject of this talk tonight, which I would be grateful if you stick to the subject, is that collision between the Western, European, liberal, social, atheistic, and nihilistic thinking with Russian traditional way of thinking, and especially Russian religious Orthodox Christianity. So I will stop here, but there is much more that we can talk, and I will give you the floor now. So please.
Thank you.
Thank you
very much. Nash, I wanted to ask you,